Yes.
Yeah,
We're gonna get right into it. This is a City of Hardyville workshop. Again, the rules of workshop are that we all respect the previous speaker. There's no order. Everybody can chime in when they want. Just make sure the previous speaker is done and has yielded the floor before you take over. I just want to remind everybody and staff also when you come to the podium, it was told Saturday that the previous meeting I couldn't be heard, so let's make sure all speakers have their microphones turned on and they are speaking into the microphone so these anybody who's watching at home or wants to rewatch it, they can hear and understand what's being said. So, with that preamble, we'll turn it over to Mr. Zimbor and Mr. Boyles.
All righty then. Well, good afternoon. It's always a pleasure coming before you. So we have officially titled Workshop 2. I think it's 2.5 or 3, but we'll say it's Workshop 2.
We are going to do a better job next year in
How we number, how we the numerical of the presentations. But all right, let's get started. So we did the mayor did have some questions, which we did provide, which we will go through that shortly, so we can get those questions answered. Here's our calendar, just so everybody's on the same page. It is May 9th today. It's my wife's birthday and my youngest birthday, and they're in New York City, walking the Brooklyn Bridge. So they had a good day today, I guess. And also Miss Ashley's birthday. So happy birthday to them. Okay, so we are in budget workshop 2. Our goal was to hopefully have some closure today, get to the end game if that's possible. If that's not, then we will probably not be able to do first reading on May 18th, and that will be probably the June 1st meeting, but we'll see where we go. So we've got, as council knows, 2 readings, and then July 1 is the new fiscal year. Go ahead. So quickly, this is what our goals are. We just kind of review what the information we gave you today. Mr. John is going to address the mayor's questions that he sent us yesterday. And then I think, at least from our perspective, there could be additional topics. We believe millage rate, just confirming that, what it's going to be, COLA calculation, proposed positions, and proposed vehicle purchases. If there's anything else, obviously, we want to discuss that and hopefully, again, come to some reasonable conclusion so we can move forward with the final document preparation. Go ahead.
I just want to say to the council, the questions I sent were my personal questions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else doesn't have their own set of questions as well. So I just want to, please, council, these are not necessarily the only questions, and I'm going to have follow-up questions to some of these answers as well. So, take it away.
All right, next slide, John. Come on, John, keep up now.
Okay.
I'm going, John.
All right, here we go. All right, so we did have our, we'll tell the pre-submission budget workshop, where we kind of presented the kind of where we're at, where we were going, solicit feedback. We did that on the 28th of March. I submitted the budget to you, folks, on April 6th. We had our first budget workshop on April 11th. We discussed all those topics. I don't need to read it. Then April 17th, we gave you a bunch of more information that was supplemental to the workshop and the questions asked by the council members. All right, go ahead. And now Mr. John's going to lead us through kind of a Q&A quickly of Mayor Williams' questions and what our answers are.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As the city manager said, it's always good to be here in front of you, and hoping to work with you today to get through to the end game. And I know typically you guys don't like to have slides just read to you, but I also know that this information has come to you relatively recently, so you may not have had a chance to absorb it. So if you'll advise whether you want me to read through each question and summarize our answers, or if you just want to give me a minute with it, or
Well, since I submitted the questions, this one was about fire department overtime. I think it was Mr. Mearsman and one of the back um, workshops asked to submit a historical background on the overtime, and I'm trying to find it. And you submitted what was it, about 5-year history of police
That's
and
correct. I
fire.
think that was submitted on April 17th in response to
The
the 11th and 12th.
The April 17th, I think Mr. Mearsman asked for that. And that led to this follow-up question because I looked at this and the fire department has much more overtime over the course of that 5 years. And of course, I can't find it, which one this was.
Would you like for me to find it so we can?
Wait, April 17th. Okay, I got it. So every year for the last 5 years, the fire department has substantially more overtime than the police department. And that's why I asked, what are the causes of that? And the first sentence in saying that, is because of opening up Fire Station 84. However, 84 just opened, and this trend of high overtime in the fire department is at least 5 years old. Didn't happen since 84 came into existence. So I'm still a little baffled why the overtime number continues to run at such a high rate.
Well, and the responses to these questions, by the way, were not just mine and the city managers. We had a number of department heads pitch in with this as well. So Chief Camp and Chief Rao were both very helpful in providing the answer to this first question. A couple of things, and particularly when you look at it compared to the police department, fire department has more staff, their shifts are longer, and then I thought they did a pretty good job of saying that an average year for a firefighter is 2756, and there is this is probably not how they would say it, but I would say there's quite a bit of built-in overtime for the fire department. And it is increasing because the staffing has increased, not just because of Fire Station 84. And the full answer here is as we add people, of course, for the coming year, we're looking to start the ambulance service, and we're looking to there's substantial staffing that we have to have with that as well.
Again, this confuses me because one of the concepts of, okay, add staff reduces overtime, but that's not the 5-year history here. We keep adding staff, and our staff has increased by over 100% in the last 5-6 years, and yet the overtime continues to be, through this past year, just through 414, is the highest it's ever been, and in spite of the fact that staff's included. Now, I'm not saying it's not legitimate. I struggle to understand this explanation.
And I just looked to see if Chief Rao, and I almost walked into him when I stepped back. So I think he probably has a better way of explaining it than I do.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The way that we look at it is kind of broken down in here. If you were to separate the numbers, and I would have to get with finance, we'd have to work through our systems. That overall number of overtime captures the overtime that is built in that each firefighter works throughout the year just because of their normal rotating shift schedule. So and you can look there, just a rough overtime rate by just kind of the admission here. We're at 161,000. This will show up as overtime, but in fact that is overtime / salary, because it is a part of their normal everyday working period. If you factored it in like other departments that are over, if their overtime was over hours worked additionally that are not scheduled, that number would reduce significantly, if that makes sense.
Anybody?
Yeah, can you explain how, when you're saying rotating shifts?
So-
Familiar with some, but this is a little bit different.
So-
Explain the rotating shifts, how that constitutes, this overtime.
So a 24, 48-hour position, they obviously work 24-hour tours at a time. Depending on how those tours fall in that 2-week period dictates the overtime. Some folks may only work 96 hours in a 2-week period. Some may work 106, 120, whatever, however that shakes out. For those folks that are working 5 24-hour tours in a 2-week period, that comes to 120 hours. Anything by federal law over 106 hours has to be overtime. So 14 of that, and if you do the math, just say on that long week, you've got 12, 13 guys at 14 hours. The way that we have it broken down, that goes into the overtime line versus the salary line. So it gives an inflated number, but it's not that we're losing that many people to hiring them back for sicknesses, PTO, things of that. It's because of the way that that's.
So what you're saying is the overtime is actual, basically it's straight time, but there is overtime based on that for necessity.
Correct. The way.
Okay, all right, thank you.
There's a lot of scheduled overtime.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess what stimulated my question, when we add more staff, they will also have more overtime.
Correct. Unless we code that scheduled overtime differently, maybe it would be however we want to do it, and we can work with the finance department to do that, to where we code non-scheduled days worked in there. You would have a different total overall number at the end of a budget cycle. But currently, if you go as is, say nobody takes a day off and we don't hire back any overtime throughout the year, the way that our system works now, it would show overtime at the end of the year.
Yes, please.
Joe, even if you coded it different and stuff, it would still end up the same. It would just be different columns, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then, and like I said,
I see what you're saying, though.
and like I said, we could break it down further. It's more of a headache for finance. But it's one of those things we can do. And here, and with our schedule rotation, we'll always have that overtime line that's in there every year that reflects that.
Chief Woodward, is the same principle applied to the?
They're on an 86-hour work week. We're on a 106-hour or pay period, and we're on a 106-hour. So we have to work 106 hours before our guys are eligible for overtime, and then their guys are 86 hours before they're eligible for
Okay,
overtime.
so I guess what I'm trying to understand, of this overtime, both police and fire, is any of it as a result of the fact that we have some sort of emergency and we got to put all hands on deck, and that's the reason for overtime?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The only time that would happen would be during hurricane season, as you've seen in the past, where we had to call everybody in. They were stationed at the police department for a 24-hour period. That would be the emergency part of it. But as you know, I don't know when a shooting's going to happen. I don't know when a stabbing's going to happen. And again, we have to call in all our investigators to work these stuff. So we have emergencies going just about every other day, where we might have to call in, or some of our units have to stay overtime, just finish their paperwork and that kind of stuff. We try to avoid that as much as possible, because I don't like them staying over no longer than they have to after being out 12 hours. So I want that stuff done right away. But unfortunately, you had officers just from the other day, we had officers that was out 15, 16 hours. And periodically that does happen, just like the other day when we had the train run over that individual. I had detectives come out and work that scene. So they come in that morning and didn't leave till later on, 8 hours later. So again, that's all overtime.
Anybody else have any questions about overtime?
For me, I guess just looking at the numbers, I would just like to see a little bit of further breakdown of the numbers.
And it'll take a little time to do that. We can certainly work on that and get it to you. And we can look at non-scheduled versus scheduled
That's the numbers. that I
and
want
bear with us.
after that.
We can make that happen. And again, we have to maintain those minimum staffing amounts. As you can see, 1 battalion chief, 3 at 2 stations and 2 at the other stations, just to keep that minimum staffing model to make sure that the city's in good hands with staffing.
And also, we have preliminary hearings going on, stuff like that. Officers have to come in on their days off sometimes. We try to schedule them as much as possible for court dates on their days they're working. But again, sometimes that just don't coincide with each other. And we have all these events that happens in the city that we have to have officers here. Most of that time, I'm not taking the guys off the street. I'm having to bring officers in to take care of these events. So a lot of that stuff's going on also, just to let you know.
John, I'm sorry. John was going to say something. Let me give him the
I
floor.
was also, I asked, you had on here, somewhere in here, but I'm sure some of your, overtime is because you can't help but have injuries and, sickness. So I don't know how much, I mean, that's,
Correct. We do have guys and gals occasionally that are out for on-the-job injuries, and sometimes they have to take PTO before workers' comp kicks in. We do have folks that we come in contact with a lot of germs and things through our daily jobs, so they do get sick as well. And then also people have to take those PTO mental health days to kind of relax with their families as well. So usually we do have those minimum staffing, and we don't let the battalion chief is in charge of that for each shift and not allow it to drop beyond that. But if someone calls out last minute or something happens, we have to make sure we keep that adequate staffing.
Bo?
I had a question about what you talked about with your staffing model that you use to staff. Are there any other models that you consider, and is the way that you do it sort of the norm in sort of the fire industry in terms of staffing that creates what you just explained to us?
We are trying to keep up with industry standard, and then there's other things like through NFPA guidelines. We're nowhere near that. Two people.
Are we higher?
We're way lower. They're
Lower,
four folks on a fire engine is what they would consider adequate staffing. But we know that we're having to kind of build this program as we go, and hopefully one day we can get there. But yeah, it's one of those things. We are industry standard. A lot of our neighboring departments around us run 3-4 folks out of a firehouse day in and day out. Usually 3 are minimum, except for like the rural areas. But we're more urbanized than those folks, and we got to make sure that we have folks for immediate response as well. So we're below what I would call industry standard, but we're not doing terrible. We're managing.
Thank you.
Joey, I have a question. When the ambulances come on board and we have the paramedics manual, how is all of this going to flush out?
The ambulance will have to be staffed 24/7.
Right.
We are looking to hire part-time paramedics as well as utilizing our full-time guys. Hopefully with that, we're able to delicately balance that out with the part-time folks to make sure that we do maintain at least one paramedic on the ambulance at all times. We'll see how everything shakes out with that, but that is our goal right now, and that will be 2 additional personnel that will be added to our staffing model each day on top of the fire stations.
Okay. So have we hired an insurance company to bill people that use our ambulance services?
We currently have an RFP out now.
Mhm.
We're waiting on that to close out, but we will be billing for those roadway incidents and other things that are billable through the city. We're just waiting for the responses in that time frame to close out. Then we'll kind of qualify them and make sure that we're getting what we need.
Thank you.
Okay. Unless there's further questions, let's go to next.
Okay, and the second question was about vehicles and whether they were replacement or new vehicles, and it's a mix. It's 6 of each, really. You see the layout there. I'd be happy to answer any more questions about that if there are any.
I have a question. I understand that we give a car to every new police officer. But who's getting the Public Works one? And do we get a car, a truck for every building inspector?
Yes, the efficiency is gained by having the inspectors to each go do their own thing. And if they have to double up in a vehicle, we don't get the full utility of the second person.
And Public Works, where's that?
Public
going?
Works, same situation. If they double up, they're not going to be able to.
But there's one new, not replacement. We have a new staff member.
They are actually short a vehicle right now. We've had to move some vehicles around.
So every Public Works person has a vehicle.
I believe, John, is that, yes, yes.
We're short one, but
So,
typically everybody has
yeah,
one.
the reason why, Mr. Mayor, is because of where we put our guys out there.
Each one of them is going to likely have a mower that he's pulling behind his vehicle. We're going to take him to wherever we're sending him out there. So he can't necessarily have somebody going out there without having his own truck. He just needs to have that with all the equipment that he's carrying with him out there. So
Okay,
makes sense.
thank you. Anybody else have a question about the vehicles?
I'm just making an assumption that folks don't drive them home. They come and get them and use them, or do they?
There's very few in Public Works. I don't think anybody in building takes a vehicle.
Okay.
Roll on to number 3.
Unless somebody stops you.
Okay,
Keep going.
The question is what is the profit and loss for the rec center? And this crops up every couple of months or every 6 months or so. We have not set up the rec center as an enterprise fund, which would be a self-supporting thing. And frankly, if we did try to make to operate the rec center at a break even, it wouldn't be cost effective for our citizens or the citizens in neighboring areas to use the rec center.
I'm not, and the question was never meant to suggest that. The question was meant, from day one, before we opened it, we said we wanted to see what it costs the city every year to operate. We're not, I don't even know what an enterprise fund is, but we just wanted to know, okay, are we spending $300,000, $100,000 a year on that rec center?
Okay, Jennifer and I can work to pull something quick
Yeah,
together with the revenues and then with the actual staffing for the rec center, and then of course there's a good bit of her time and other things that we'll have to factor in, but we can put something together.
Yeah, we'd like to, from day one, this council has asked for some sort of sense of, okay, I can look at the PRT budget, and I know we've taken on an added expense for that
But what does that
building.
look like?
But what is it,
We can do that.
Okay.
We need to know that. We're asked the question by the public. We just talked about the new YMCA coming in.
No pushback at all. We'll get that. No problem. Question.
Number 4, you can put aside. It was just, it's on pages.
Like you say, keep
74.
moving. So we'll keep moving.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, it says the court is up from 221 to 353,000, and that was a big.
John, you didn't got to do that. Okay, good. Yeah, it's on 5.
Okay.
Sure you're.
I didn't, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I did not find the 221, but I did see where we were projecting this year for the court to be at 300,000, and for 24 that we were projecting for 353,000. That increase, the largest pieces of that increase reflect a full year of the part-time bailiff that was brought on in October, and then the judges also asked for a second bailiff. Again, these are part-time people, so there's not the full slate of benefits and all for that. And then the added benefit to that is with the bailiffs, Chief Woodward is not having to plug additional officers in to fill that role and that function at his police overtime rate.
Well, here's my
That's the
confusion.
bulk of what we're seeing there.
On the section of general fund detail,
Okay.
and these questions about the big jumps is where I get this. The FY '23 projected for costs for court is $221,000. And the city manager proposed is 351. Now that is a substantial increase, and I think we only approved one part-time court employee in the mix. That seems like a big jump. And your answer was it's gone from 300,000, and I don't see where that number comes from.
The 300,000 came from the operating budget in the binder for Department 7.
So why would that be different than the overall detail on page 1?
I would have to look at that.
It's right here.
I only have my slides for today.
Oh, okay, so that, if line 7 on a different section is different than line 7 on the first page, that confuses me. So if everybody opens their general fund detail, and you see the revenue, and it's listed by department, and then you have the general fund expenditures, and that's where I got my number.
I see that.
You see that?
And I do see that. And what I was working from was, if you look at page 31, that's where I'm comparing the 300 to the 353. But to your point, why are those two different? And we'll need to.
Yeah, I mean, they should be, regardless of what page it's on, if it's the same line item, it should have the same number, right?
Yes, sir.
And I see your 300,000 on page 21. And, you know, again, it should be the same number. The 353 is the same. And I remember there was only one part-time
There was a
addition,
part-time-
so 130,000. Can I apply for that part-time position? Because that would be,
There's actually, what you see budgeted for 24 is a full year of the part-time bailiff that was added this year. But then also the judges requested and the city manager is recommending a second part-time bailiff. So there would be two for the full year of fiscal year 22.
but that too, is that in our request?
Yes.
Yes, sir, it was.
It was, okay, all right.
And Mr. Mayor, I don't want to interrupt you, but to
No.
clarify, and Nancy, I know you haven't spoke yet, but to clarify, because the average person thinks a bailiff is the person that, you know, brings the people in and whatever, but these bailiffs are armed police officers, retired or whatever, and they come in and they're security for Nancy. And like, I think Sam said and whatever a while ago, Sam can put his people, whereas before he had to provide somebody for court for security, now he can go out and send his men where he wants them to go, and Nancy's still got security with these part-time, they retired police officers. So that is the significant difference.
And good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Comes into play that I did not have a clerk for several months, and now we have 2 full-time clerks with a increase in salary, so that also comes into play. why you see a lower number now versus to what you will see this fiscal year. So that plays into part. So we will be a department of 4 instead of 3.
Let me be sure I understand with the two bailiffs,
Yes, sir.
what that does, Sam, is releases you in a sense to have another police officer cover this because of the competence and background of these bailiffs that you're hiring.
Yes, sir, because before, we had the officers who were scheduled to come to court. In addition, one of his officers to scan people in and stay in the lobby while the other officers were having court. Well, now with these two bailiffs, one will be inside and one will remain outside. And as Mr. John said, we hired Mr. Gregory in October 2022. So that increased the budget, but now with the new fiscal year, he will be a full year. So it added to the budget, as well as the second clerk of court. Before, we did not have one. We lost her in August, and now we have Emily, which now we have a replaced, and also she has her remaining salary. So that increased as well.
All right, so here's where I get confused.
Yes, sir.
On slide 7 of the budget presentation at the first workshop, the city manager proposed staffing of 18 people. Under court, the only addition is 1 part-time bailiff.
Yes, sir.
Now, you're saying there's 2 part-times.
We already have one hired, so I'm asking for an additional one.
Okay, so the one you just hired is from last year's budget?
Yes, sir.
So for this,
From
the
this
current
year.
fiscal year 23 budget, the year that we're in now.
the year we're in, well, I'm already calling it last year. The
Yes.
year we're in,
Yeah, last year.
we're in now.
Yes, sir. And now we're
So-
asking for an additional one.
So there's an additional one in this budget,
Correct.
and this budget is up $130,000. So that one that was added recently wasn't there a full year, is what you're saying?
Yes,
And
sir.
that's why, okay, understand.
Okay. Plus the clerk,
Plus,
that it wasn't full year and now she is.
right, but they were last year's addition.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Understood.
Makes sense? Great. Thank you.
Question for me? Oh, Mr. Bo had a
No, it was answered that you don't have to cover that now because of this new staffing arrangement. Is that correct? I guess I'm saying, I think it is, but
Yes, sir, and all it goes back to the security is that we had one officer out by the metal detector, metal detecting people through, and you didn't have nobody in court. So now with the extra bailiff, you're gonna have one standing out there doing all the metal detecting, and you also got one in court watching security, as people are coming in before my officers even get there to start their court date and stuff.
I got you.
So that's the reason.
And when they come, they're coming for their cases. I got you, Sam. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Now, is it the same kind of answer for the building department? I mean, that's
The old building department.
almost, that $350,000. I knew I went into the wrong field. I went the wrong,
Yes, we have had an increase in necessary need for building inspectors, and that is growing. We also were without, as Nancy mentioned with hers, we were without a plans examiner for a portion of this fiscal year before we got Brad Duncan in place, and that is also a change that we will be increasing. So, because he'll be here for a full year, and he is well worth that money that we're spending on that. So,
I don't question that. I could question the $350,000 for one person, one new person, and one part of year person. That seems like a big number.
Yeah, well, there was some short staffing there for a little bit that it took us a while to.
So there's more than just one that was hired during the year?
yes.
Okay. Jump right in.
Okay, now go ahead.
I'm seeing this, 20% increase. Have revenues kept on pace for that also?
I just about weekly, I hear Brandon say something to the effect of we're busier than we've ever been. So
Busy
my
is
answer to
good,
that would
numbers I need.
Numbers, yes, we are well above what we budgeted for our revenue. And yes, that is continuing to increase.
Are you 20% above?
Yes. Yep. 25 is the number.
Okay, it would be possible to see the numbers.
Yes.
Okay. Should be a fun one. Fund balance.
So I read that question to be, we currently have the budget stabilization at one number, and that's at 20% of planned expenditures for the upcoming year. And that the question was, what would it look like if we increased that 20% to 21, 22,
Yes.
and so forth? So each percent that we would increase it is $192,000. In other words, if you were to make a decision to move the budget stabilization fund, and for those watching at home, that's also what we call the rainy day fund or the emergency fund, whatever you want to call it. We call it the budget stabilization fund. You would be adding $192,000 to that fund.
Yes, one of the things, besides the fact that we've had this conversation over the last couple of years, I forget what year it was, 2 years ago, we changed from 25 to 20%.
That's correct.
I've never been comfortable with that. And particularly with the fact that we have increased our revenues by literally millions. And then now it would seem that based on the numbers handed to us, that we're using $785,000 of that fund because our expenditures are $785,000 more than our revenue. And as a fiscally conservative person, I find that disturbing. I think that with all this revenue coming in, we should only be spending what we have in, and these rainy day funds should be used for rainy days. And I'm uncomfortable with the fact that we've lowered this to 20% and we continue to spend that money instead of saving it for many projects. We have a new police department coming. We have that we need. There's a lot of capital things that we need, and the hub and White Hardy Boulevard have been sitting. Those plans have been sitting there for 4 years, and I'm uncomfortable spending our rainy day fund in this to pay for everyday expenses.
Understood. Mr. Mayor, if I may make a clarification. The budget stabilization fund is literally funds that we set aside. We put them in a separate bank account. We don't think about them. We don't talk about them. The only reason they're there is if we have that catastrophic train wreck, or we have a medical emergency or a hurricane or something like that. That is different than the general fund balance that we propose to spend some of for this current year. Those are two separate things. So the money that we're proposing to spend from the general fund balance does not have anything to do with that budget stabilization. That's the budget stabilization money, for lack of a better word, is siloed funds that they're just sitting there in the hopes that we never ever need them, but they're there if we do.
But we could use that instead. Again, my basic point is this. Maybe my terminology of fund balance.
And I don't mean to pick that up, sir. I hope you know that.
No, I'm trying to clarify in my own mind.
Sir.
Because I do get confused about fund balances and budget stabilization. I'm not saying I don't get confused. What I'm concerned about, number one, does this council, not the one 2 years ago who changed it, but does this council want to continue with that 20% number? and that's for the group to decide. And number two, the projected use of 785,000 of the fund balance is a reflection of that we are spending $785,000 more than our revenues. And again, as a fiscally conservative person, I find that disturbing.
Mayor,
Yes.
one thing I was thinking about is I understand where you're coming from with the, because I remember we did have the 25% and we changed it to 20. And that might be something that might, just in my opinion, that we might want to consider. But if we considered that this year, I would think they would have to all scramble back, because that would be, if it's $192,000 per point, then that's almost $1 million. We'd be at least 900 and something thousand dollars we'd be taking away from this year's budget. I see where you're coming from, and that may be a target maybe for next year or something, but I would think if we did that this year, that'd be catastrophic.
That's why I asked John for, what each level would be.
Right.
Because again, if the council wants to consider a change, now you can see, well, maybe we only want to do 21% this year and 22 next year, or you don't want to change it at all. But I thought it was important to bring up that conversation and have this council decide, because this council is different than the one who changed it a couple years ago. And so that's why I wanted to bring this to the forefront for this council to decide. Yes, Paul.
John, a question that the mayor and John had touched on, and the thought went through my mind. At $192,000, and this is for you to think about from a financial leadership point of view, instead of taking it all the way back to, 5 points, could we go a point in the next year?
Right.
Do this gradually rather than the bite off, because as John's saying, that's almost $1 million. If we did a portion, like just a percentage point, as kind of the rainy day thought process, and I'm not asking you to answer it now, I'm just asking you to consider that with all the work that you're doing. Is that something that is maybe even doable if you wanted to do it?
I will take the chance to answer now if I could.
Please do.
I appreciate you giving me time. My first thought is that's a policy decision, and if that's your instruction to the city manager, then that's what we will work to. And then, of course, and a number of our department heads say, I just need to know what I have, and I'll make it work. I'm sure Mr. Carroll's nodding, so he's been there too. So we will, we'll find a way to make happen whatever it is the council instructs us to do. So now $192,000. Don't know. I don't need to tell you that. That's a little more than 2 mills. So we gotta. It's not small numbers.
I hear you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. You and I talked, just because for the information, and if you can say it again for the folks that may be watching this, or that goes on the story. As we look at this budget stabilization, the rainy day fund, as we choose to call it, the recommended level per South Carolina or per can you explain that?
Again, and I meant to look it up after we talked the other day. I'm not certain what the state of North Carolina's requirement is. I'd be stunned if it was less than what Government Finance Officers Association recommends, and they recommend 16.67. So we're at 20. So we're above that by a good bit. And then there's so many things that you guys have to consider. A lot of places have tornadoes and they don't have hurricanes. If we have something, we're gonna, it's gonna be a hurricane likely, and it's gonna be a big deal. So those are all things that policymakers have to decide.
I agree. We need to start looking at increasing that, because we all know today's cost is more than last year's cost.
Absolutely.
That amount of money that we have in there this year that we're going to carry over to next year will probably be less for these emergencies. 20%, maybe it is livable, But if we leave it at that 20%, we leave that number alone, we'll outgrow it.
The 20% is growing, but I think your point is it's not growing
It's
like
not,
you're
it will
going to
not
want it
grow
to.
nearly as fast as what the need, if we do need that. And I'm not saying that we need to jump to 25%. I'm just saying that I would like to see, and this is a policy for us to make, that we will give instructions that we do want that to be risen. And I'm not saying 25 is a number, maybe 23% is a number that we can live with. But if we don't start planning, it's easy to push it away. Way
Understood.
too easy. That's it.
Yeah, and jumping off of what Steve said, what worries me is the emergencies we have. Nobody's talked about the CSX train that runs through our city and through Jasper County. We all know what happened in Ohio. And when the governor reached out to the President of the United States for help, he was told to go pound sand. So in the interim, while we are waiting for FEMA to come in or some kind of federal help to come in, it's on the city to help out. And, you know, whatever money we have there is going to run out before you blink 5 times. So, you know, that was one of my fears, is that is there going to be enough money before the feds kick in, if they're going to even kick in any money? Because that could put us in a hole if we have that kind of situation.
Well, I think what we'll do is, again, on any of these issues, we'll take a straw poll, and the council will decide whether or not they want to leave it at 20, 21, whatever the number is. Any other comments, questions regarding that point? I had asked about Juju Hudson and, you know, what it was. And primarily, the answer I was most concerned about was how it was being paid, and that's ARPA and DA fees. Yeah. So that pretty much satisfied my curiosity on that. I don't know, anybody else? And I have no objection, you know, we did this in phases a couple of years ago. My main concern was, you know, how it was being paid for and whether or not that's a priority. But with ARPA, there were certain specific uses, and we approved that a couple of years ago or some time ago when we got the money, what each amount would go into each bucket. So I'm certainly satisfied with that answer. Okay, I think that ends what I had submitted as questions. Council, anybody have other questions that I didn't ask? I have a group of other issues when you're done that I also sent just to council that I'll raise here one by one. But please, anybody have any additional questions for Mr. Boyle? Yes, sir.
Just for my clarification, maybe everybody else may have understood this but me. But can you break down and tell me what exactly we did with Enterprise?
We are,
I know it was, do we ever, I think Bo or something, or somebody had mentioned something about maybe trying to work out something with Enterprise since they did not come, what, for lack of better words, come through like they said they were, if they were going to negotiate with us, or if we still had to do the $1 million, and how we were going to finance the $1 million or whatever.
the $1 million, just through the passage of time, is dropping a little bit each time as we go. You know, as far as has any decisions been made, we've not made any decision except that if council is going to approve for us to borrow to buy out those leases and whatever, then we are prepared to do that. And that is staff's recommendation. Because even if we play out these leases, we still owe a retainage on those at 5 years in order to actually be able to call them our own.
Because it was it's still a big concern if we had to, this is just my opinion, but if we have to, I don't see how we cannot let y'all get a loan or something, because $1 million for, that's gonna be a big hit all at one chunk for this year.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you clean that up, John, we won't be faced with any residual values on leases or anything. I mean, it'll be,
No, our plan is if we buy these out, we are literally buying them out. We
That's it.
Own them when we sign the papers. Yes, sir.
All right.
Correct.
And, you know, John, I'm glad you brought that up because, again, with us using $785,000 from our fund balance, you know, and really our expenditures, you know, why are we using that money for things such as this as opposed to just spending it for our general usage? And that's where I start to get a little confused in terms of the priorities of how we're spending. Any other questions before I go on to the next list?
have one, Harry,
Sure,
if
Bill.
I might, with the enterprise. And Mr. Brown, we were talking about maybe getting into the additional leasing or some things we talked about a couple of weeks ago, as I recall. I guess there's some lessons to be learned there. They might not be our lessons, but there's some lessons to be learned. And we're getting into something similar. And a lot of times, certain governments, they do things very well, and they don't do things that aren't their normal day things, and it's a learning curve. And I just want to make sure that we don't forget about the lessons learned. We have a repeat for some of the things I heard you talking about, Mr. Brown, the last time. And that's not a lack of confidence in your leadership, but it's simply been some inherent things built in that city governments face that they don't do every day. And there's caution there, for me at least, about that. And, you know, confidence in you at the same time. So I just want to make sure that we remember that, John, and that you and Mike are on top of that along with John.
Council, should I start on my other list? I'm going to start with the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Might as well get it over with. The administration has proposed an 8.58% increase in the COLA increase across the board for everyone. I asked.
If I may interrupt, we have this later. If you want me to just jump to it in the slides, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, put that up. I have it in my book here.
Okay.
What I did in after we got this budget, I asked all the fellow all my fellow mayors and administrators in the area, and I see Mr. Boyle put it out, and most of what you can see is in the 5% range, and you see that those numbers like Jasper County, Beaufort, Port Royal, these percentages are what they told me, some of them, and I don't remember which one was which, were the combination of COLA and the merit increase. So 8.58 is substantially higher than anyone around. We also recently, which I forwarded to the council, the survey of other municipalities throughout the state came out, and generally it's in the 4 to 5% range. I didn't see anyone, and I'm saying I looked at every single one of the 200 municipalities, but generally around the country, around the state, private industry, 4 to 5% is what is being given out. Mrs. Guzman gave me some information that she was looking up, and the military is very near and dear to her heart. 2023 pay raise for the military is 4.6%, 2022, 2.7%. 21 was 3, 20 was 3.1. So, you know, our military is certainly not giving big increases either. It is my personal opinion that 8.5%, regardless of what it's based on, is excessive compared with what the world is doing. Now, I understand that last year was a high inflation rate. Deflation rate has come down to 6% or lower since that time. So it's a very unusual situation compared to past years where there was the inflation rate year to year was pretty steady. And now we had a situation where it went up way and now it's come down. I think I'm very uncomfortable with the 8.5%. And I was looking for some statistical way to do this and looking what everybody else is doing. And I'm going to throw out for discussion with the council that we give the same as last year at 5.08%, which is a very high percent compared to everybody else. And that's in addition to the merit increases that were given effective January 1st. So it's potential that an employee will get 9% for the year. So I want to throw it out to the council because we have to give direction to administration and approve a number so that it's included in the budget for when we come to first reading. So anybody? I want to know if anybody has an opinion about what that number should be. I've given a suggestion. If anybody has an alternate suggestion, you disagree, do you want to give 8.58%? It's up to the majority of the council to decide what that number should be. I'm giving my opinion. I'd like to hear what the rest of the council wants to do.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, knowing that we are $700,000 in expenses over revenue already, 8% in a great year, I would love to give it, but to be fiscally responsible, I cannot do that. I do believe if we maintain the same as last year, we may have a good year next year and we can review this. But at this time, I just don't feel it's fiscally responsible for the city and the residents to do that, the 8+%. That's my opinion.
Anyone else have an opinion? Including if your opinion is to keep it the same. I mean, you know, we have to come to a decision here as a group. So now's the time to offer your suggestions and opinion.
Well, it's always kind of tough for me when it comes to the employees and stuff, but one thing I think was brought up, I don't know if it was last year or whatever, anytime, once you give that raise, it's forever. I mean, it's just, you know, it just keeps building and building and building, and I just think this year that we need that I concur with you and Steve, and it's hard for me to do, but like I said, maybe next year we can do better, but it's not just a 5 point whatever we did last year, but like you say, most people will get a merit raise too, so it's possible somebody get a 9, so I concur.
Anybody else have an opinion before I take a straw poll?
I'm in agreement with the general consensus. The number for me would be between 5 and 6, but I think the 8.5 is excessive based on just a little bit of the data I've looked at. And And what's important, Mike, and for the rest of that this isn't a communication about how people are valued. This is a communication about being competitive and meeting up with what's being done to keep our overall costs down without discounting our employees. And so it's important that we do what's right financially, at the same time communicate that we value people, and this isn't something where we're giving a different message there. So for me, it's between 5 and 6. I can live with either one.
Well, thank you for that, because I think it is important. I mean, we're expressing opinion, and I know that, you know, this has been publicized for several months, that if we give less than 8.5%, there's going to cause a lot of disappointment by people. But again, this is our most basic job, our being the council and being fiscally responsible. And so you're right, Bo, and I'm glad you said it. This is no reflection on what we feel about the staff and the performance of the staff. You know, given a percent increase is not a reflection of I love you or I don't love you. It's a reflection of fiscal responsibility. And what's normal. I think it's important that, you know, we're not off into some other atmosphere than the rest of the country and even the region. And especially when, again, that $785,000, we're spending more than we're taking in. So thank you. It's not a reflection of staff or our opinion of the performance of staff.
This has not been an easy decision.
So what I'd like to do, because we have to give the staff direction, I've made a suggestion to council that we use the same as last year, which is 5.0%. I'm going to take a straw poll, say yes or no. You also have the chance to give a different number.
Are we talking about 5.0 or 5.08, sir?
5.08, same as last year. So that's my vote. I'll go with the Mayor Pro Tem. Bo, what's your vote?
My vote is, I agree with Harry. I would be more comfortable with 5.5, but I can go with the 5.0. I'm not trying to wheeze out or anything. I just, I look at these numbers in my experience over the years with compensation in my previous life, and so that's where I'm at on that.
So we have two numbers thrown out, 5.08 and 5.5. So let's go from there. I'll go alphabetically. John?
I'll go, since we did all going down, some I can compromise in 5.5.
Next is Valerie. Steve?
5.5.
Okay, we have 5.5 seems to be the consensus. Let's go with that. Next. Now, while I have the bullseye on my back, let me go to the next one that the darts can start throwing at me. This is not the first year I've said this. I think we need to strengthen our police department more than, that is a priority. I don't debate any request for additional staff. I do get concerned about the huge increases we've taken in staff over the years as a general statement, but no individual request do I argue with. However, I think we've put off hiring police officers long enough. It is my opinion, and I've shared this with council, that adding a rec director an accounting clerk is a great want, but we need police officers. I'm suggesting that we take the money from that rec person and the accounting clerk, save it for another year, whatever. I don't know what happened to our intern program in the rec department, but, you know, if we can, bring that back. And put that money into the police department. I would also say, I'm going to give you some numbers that, and why I think this. In fiscal year 17, the fire department had a budget of $2,000,001. We had 26 people. The proposal for this year is $6 million and 56 people. That's a 177% increase in spending and a 115% increase in personnel. And also, if you recall, we put a lot of money into buying a whole new fleet of fire trucks. I don't disagree with one penny of that, not one single penny. And the reason I went into that whole overtime situation, basically what I heard is we're not going to reduce overtime by adding another 3 firefighters. It is my opinion that we should take that money, hold off on the 3 firefighters. Station 84 is a great addition, but until all those buildings go up down there, we've been servicing this community with 3 for a long time. I would prefer to take those 3 staff positions. I don't argue that they're necessary, and put it into the police department. And that's what I would like to see done, because I think we need, and it came up yesterday again, we need to clean up those hotels. We need to clean up the crime that's happening at Exit 5, and we need more officers. And the reason why we should start budgeting it now, and Bo and I heard this time and time again, it takes a long time to get a qualified officer on the road. If we don't budget it, it's not going to happen. The process doesn't start. We're already down. How many are you down, Chief? 2. If we don't budget it, we're never going to fill, we're not going to get up to the number we need to get to. We need to budget it. We need to be aggressive in recruiting. If we have to do another survey on proper salaries, all the other things that we want, from the fire department to the rec department to everything else, is a nice one. I don't disagree. But we need police department numbers to go up and take care of the John Smith Road problem, the Argent Boulevard problem, the crime problem at Exit 5, and you know, those things have to be a priority above all else, in my opinion. So, having said that, and I'm getting off my soapbox and then open up for discussion by council.
Let me share my view. First of all, budgets and allocations of resources are always a tough thing. And the thing that I think about, as someone new to government over the last 4 or 5 years, safety is the premier responsibility we have to our citizens and our taxpayers, that they are safe. And when I look at some of the things that I hear about Exit 5 and other situations, it doesn't fit with the character of Hardeeville. It doesn't represent who we are from a governing point of view or the kind of community that we are. And so my feeling is Harry's focus on safety and Exit 5, and I would add, from a legal point of view, some changes in laws that might make some of the things that are happening there, where people are living in places that were intended to be places you stay, and those kinds of things. So what we're doing is a full intervention from a safety point of view, from police officers, from training, from our legal response, and that we do it in this year. And some of the things that we have to put on hold, like the rec situation, are temporary things for what I consider a greater good, a greater importance. And that's how I look at it. And it's important that no one feels discounted. It's just like the situation with the raises. We appreciate what people are doing. It's a critical situation down there, and something bad's going to happen if we don't intervene and do something about it. So that's where I'm coming from on this one.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We are a growing community. We are growing faster than probably any of us could ever have anticipated. Ms. Snowden, how many homes do you anticipate will have their COs this year? Would 750 be a reasonable number?
Yeah. Dave, it's probably 800.
800.
800 to 900.
800, and you figure the average. We will probably increase our residency by 1,200 people this year,
Yeah, more than that.
which is probably 10% of what we currently have. And staffing and public safety, police and fire both have to be a priority at this point, because not having those properly staffed and provided will cripple us in many other ways. We're looking for retail right now. That's a very important factor to them. They check crime statistics. They check all of that. The thought of, if I was the mother, the father, the spouse of one of our officers, realizing that at any given time they're out there alone with only one other officer, honestly, I would try to discourage them from working here in Hardeeville, just for that reason. What happened at Exit 8 a week ago is a prime example. We lost one whole shift of officers. So now we're into an overtime situation again. So we need to staff that properly. And I appreciate and I agree all the other positions are important. But to me, we have to prioritize. And that's where my thoughts are now, is we need to prioritize towards the police department. And I can say, we'll get into it a little bit later, it's not only with this that I see that. John left the room. We didn't save money. I don't want to say it that way. We repositioned some dollars in our budget with the salaries. That cuts down, hopefully, on that $700,000 that we have. We need to redirect the monies, not just save them. We need to redirect them to where they're critically needed now. A year from now, things may have changed, and we can even look at improving more positions than what we're discussing, not putting in today. But for right now, the police are where my thoughts are, and the fire department are right now. And that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments or alternate suggestions to what I put forward? Again, this is a council decision, and each one of us needs to decide what you would like to see in terms of where we emphasize or prioritize.
Says, on the road, because Monday brought home the fact that we could have easily lost them both. And while those two officers were on scene dealing with that, our back door was wide open. Every place else in the city had no coverage. So that bothers me, because I think our taxpayers deserve better. And we have to do better by our officers. We have to do better.
I just want to add one other thing. One of the things that Bo and I have learned, and I reported this to council, the quality of our police officers that we met is phenomenally high. Former military, college educated, and, you know, if we need to maintain that high quality, and if we're, and that's why I'm going back to the point that we have to start now. We have to put the budget positions in place so that we have time to get and maintain that high quality of officer that the chief's done a wonderful job of getting really high-quality people. And that's why I think we got to budget it now, even if it takes time to fill it.
May I just add something to clarify? I'm going to make sure that we're on the same wavelength. And this is to you, Chief. You hear what we're saying about if we add Exit 5 and some of these things that we've all talked about as a group, our top priorities, not just a couple more people riding around in a patrol car, but there's a focus to the intervention that we want to do from a variety of sources. Does that make sense to you? And are we on the same wavelength there?
Yes, sir. And there's different positions in the police department that these people can be in. Extra detective to handle the overdoses, drugs, and that kind of stuff. That would be helpful to that Exit 5 area. Yes, sir.
Good.
Sam, before you leave, the 2 slots that you are down now, is that just because you can't find anybody right now, or why are you 2 down?
Well, it is that, but it's also trying to find the qualified persons that I want to bring aboard the police department and to keep that high quality that I'm after also.
The high quality really did show up in those meetings that Harry did in this little luncheon we were doing. I'll tell you, I was very, very impressed with the quality of those people.
Yes, sir.
Sam, before you go,
One more for the road.
you and I have talked, and I think Harry or somebody brought up a point a while ago. And I know the answer is not going to be, I'm 100% satisfied, but do we need to re-examine the starting salaries of these officers versus Beaufort, Port Royal, anywhere in the neighboring areas, or is that one of the reasons you're too short?
I'm not going to say that's the only reason. Like again, I'm looking for qualified
Yeah.
people, and we just recently hired a young man, and his starting salary is going to be $43,282. I'm going to pin a badge on him and a gun, and I'm asking him to go out here and do
Which
this
is life
stuff
for me.
for $42,283. But again, it's something the city manager and myself's been working on, and we're continually working on that every day. We don't take it lightly, but I understand there's only so much money out here that you can give. But again, that's what we're asking these people, to pin a badge on them and a gun and tell them now to go out here and get these bad people off the street for that kind of price, and who has a family. So
Right.
there's a situation we're in. We'll continue asking it, and if they want to come aboard, that's what we're coming aboard on, unless, the city hits the lottery and we can pay them more. Again, I understand there's only so many tax dollars out here that we can spend, and we realize that in the police department, but it's not because we're not going to ask for it, because we are asking for it. But again, I understand the city manager has got only a certain amount of money we can spend, and you as the council can only give me a certain amount of money to spend. And we realize that, but we're going to do what we can do with the manpower I have, and we're going to keep looking for good people.
And here, John brings up a really good point, and thank you, John. If we took, as I'm proposing, we held off for a year with the accounting clerk, and we held off with the rec person, and we held off with 3 firefighters. Now, that's X amount of money, right? With a police department, that requires equipment, cars, a lot of things that go into that. But it also could be, rather than that being 5 new people, it could be 4 people and a pay adjustment to get it more competitive.
Or 3 people in a.
And 3 people and
I agree.
so get something. So the point is not to say, 5 new people, but to say, take that money from pot A and give it to the police pot and do as much with it as you can, as you see fit. Does that make sense to the council?
It does. To think about how this goes, Chief, you and I have had the discussion before. For the people that may be watching at home or that's going to be on the recording, what is that cost of hiring a first-year officer? You and I have discussed that. Maybe the council and everybody else would like to hear.
Well,
where
I
that
can
is.
tell you, just starting this young man out that's coming on and don't have no experience, you're going to spend $150,000 by the time you hire him on, pay all his benefits, and put him in a police car. It's going to be around $150,000. That's not counting his schooling. That's just putting him in a car, putting him on the job, and then he has to go through all the schooling.
The radios, the
Right.
uniform, and all of that come
Cameras,
into.
all that
So
stuff.
the salary is just the beginning
Yes.
of
Yes.
of the expenses to bring in new personnel.
Sure. That's,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Chief, can I ask you one question before before you go sit down? How much does the deputies start off at the same level as our PD officer?
Well, they had a big increase this year, so
Okay.
that's been the talk of the town for me and the city manager, and we've been discussing and all like that. And I don't know where the county got all this money. They somewhere got all this money, and all of a sudden
They
gave
raised taxes.
well, all I can tell you is they got a big increase, and that was the big discussion in the police department, and had me worried as the police chief that I was going to start losing people. But what I try to tell my people is this: hang with me. I will work hard to try to get you what we got to get to keep you here, because I don't want to lose good police officers just because of a salary.
Do you think that has been a hindrance to you hiring officers in?
It's not only in Jasper County; it's Beaufort County. It's
Okay.
Bluffton. It's anybody, and again, there's a difference in the people we're hiring today than it was back when they hired me. Is I didn't look at the salaries. That's not what my function was. In today's world, though, it's not that way. It's what you can pay me today, and that's what I'm finding out a lot more of. And I hate to see that, but unfortunately, that's the way it's going. Like I told the city manager the other day, I think we had that discussion. You know, if I didn't have no bills at home, I'd do this job for nothing. And I would, because it means that much to me. But unfortunately, I do have to pay bills.
Oh, wow, we just found some more money because he's
Yeah.
gonna work for free.
I said, if I
All
didn't,
right.
if I didn't
give
get
you-
bills.
Thanks, Sam.
Yes.
Gonna give you your wish.
Well, Chief, I've looked through this budget numbers back and forth, and I find no line item in here for buying lottery tickets. So we are not going to win the lottery.
Again, that's where we're at, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank y'all.
So, we can keep talking, but let's try to narrow this. My proposal to council is that we hold off those 5 positions that I mentioned and put whatever that money is into the police department. And the city manager and the chief can determine whether that's more people, whether they have to raise certain salaries to be competitive. That'll be their discretion. That's my proposal. I'd like to, again, ask the council to either say yes to that or give up an alternative proposal like we did the last time, so we can give that direction to staff. And I'll start again with the Mayor Pro Tem. That's my, so you know my vote. Mayor Pro Tem.
I support the outline that Harry did for all the reasons we've been talking about.
Let's go reverse alphabetical order and go to Mr. Mearsman.
While I agree with some of your insight, others I do question, and it's not part of it. I have my concerns about reducing the amount of with the fire department. Bottom line, what it comes down to is, I personally, and I'll say it now, I would much rather see our millage rate left alone, those added funds be used to properly staff. It's not the complete answer, but it's my own experience and people that I have asked. To save $70-80 on their city taxes, not anything can say anything about the county, but at the expense of public safety, they'll take public safety. Every one of them that I've asked has done that. So, yes, Mayor, I agree with your recommendations pursuant that the reduction of the millage rate occurs. Without that reduction of the millage rate, I would like to see at least that one person put back with the fire department.
So the millage rate conversation will be separate. So what we need to, do you want to have that, does council want to have that discussion first and then come back to this straw poll, or? Okay, then let's do that. The, before we do that, you know, we'll come back to the straw poll on the staff. But there was another point that I asked you all to consider. We have an expense of $250,000 on a bike and pedestrian master plan budgeted here. And of that, in the capital expenditures, 150 of that comes out of development fees, and 100,000 comes out of the general fund. There's $1 million right there. 1 plus. So my recommendation to council was, we spent a lot of money, I don't even know what the number is, on 2 master plans in 2019. They were passed. White Hardy Boulevard and the Hub. And those things have pretty much, I think between the two of them, probably come to an expenditure of, you know, $20 million. And those master plans have sit on the shelf. So now we're going to spend another $250,000 on a master plan. We don't have the money to do anything about. We'll get a master plan, and it'll go in somebody's drawer for X number of years because it's going to be hundreds and thousands of dollars, and we haven't even started on the 2 we already approved. I think that can wait. And there is $100,000. The DA fees, it can be used for something else. And the $100,000 that's coming out of general fund can be used for some of these conversations that we're having. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
You've given a good alternative.
Yeah.
And I like that.
We had a crystal ball and could look into the future, but we don't. So we have to deal with the here and now. And I think it's a good idea for right now. Making plans that we may not ever be able to accomplish in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, I think, listen, I really believe that we need bike and ped trails. But again, if we're not ready to spend the money to do it, why spend the money on the master plan? Let's wait on that until we're ready. We have the money, and we know we're ready. We get the master plan, we're gonna follow what it tells us to do. So, do I have any disagreement with striking that particular item? Okay, so we'll go on now to, yeah, unless somebody objects. So now we go down to the last point is the millage. And Mr. Mearsman has expressed his opinion, and my opinion is I will vote no to any budget that doesn't have at least 2 mills, and I've expressed this to the council in advance. I think that the $70 per person is not the proper way to look at it. I think the proper way to look at it is the fact that because of this council and previous councils' philosophy of have a regular reduction of millage has reduced the per home number over the last 10 years substantially, because we're down now from 153 in 2012 down to 97. And you add up all those $50, $40, $60 per home per year, and it's quite a bit of money, and it's every year. So it's no different than what we talked about, the fund balance going 20 to 21. Tax reduction is basically doing the same thing. We're year after year. We have, and I've shared this with council as well, and I hope I looked at the right number. Our expenses are up 4.8% million. And when you take the decrease in debt service that we're paying is down 600,000, we're spending, and that's coming from a lot of different sources, we're spending $5.4 million more than last year. We should be able to give back the people who are putting up with all the bad side of development, traffic and all the other things, to give back 160,000 of that 5.4 that we're spending more. I've always been adamant about a regular reduction of millage, and I will remain so, and that's my opinion. But there's 5 of us. We know Steve, Val, Bo, John. Where do you stand?
Let me think out loud with you, if I could, Steve. What Harry is suggesting, does that help with your situation, with the point you raised? Now these identified some other resources financially.
Without seeing what the total savings are, we're talking positions and we're talking a lot here. John, Mike, the numbers that we've discussed or we've eliminated and things we've done, do we have a number for what we have cut off the budget right now?
Well, the staffing thing, Steve, the proposal is not to reduce it, is to shift it.
To shift it.
Those 5 positions to shift the money
To shift the.
from one, so that doesn't reduce.
No, but how much money have
But
we
it-
shifted? That's, I guess,
But to your point, by going from 8.5% increase down to 5.5, what's that number, John? Do you know what that number is?
Similar's getting ready to tell you it's 358.
Mike, you can sit there.
Yeah,
We got it.
yeah.
I wasn't gonna say that.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Make him deliver the bad news.
Right. Right. So, yeah, so
Okay.
on the reduction of the cost of living increase, again, this is just a rough number because there's probably didn't factor in Social Security and everything else, but whatever. So just the salary decrease from the 8.58 to the 5.5, $308,000. So that's $308,000
Okay.
that we're not spending at this point.
And the 100 we just took out of general fund for the master plan.
Contribution for that capital improvement project. And then the total for the 5 people that you said to defer, which were the 3 firemen, the assistant program manager, and the accounting clerk, that adds up to $382,000.
But that's not a reduction. We're
Right,
just-
so you're
we're
shifting that
shifting it.
over for personnel, and if you just look at patrolmen, I mean, just in general, all in, that's about 2.25 patrolmen. So that's equipment, salary, wages, car, the gun, the whole shooting match. So
No pun intended?
No pun intended. So that,
What do you do with half a patrol?
that's where you're at, that 2.2.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
New short guy.
He'll get less bullets.
Okay, that changes and this is the point that I was making. If we can find the savings elsewhere in the budget to accommodate our goal of increasing the police department and keeping public safety primary in what we're doing, then I will agree to a reduction of the millage. My point is somehow to find the funding that I thought was necessary for the safety of the community. It wasn't just to speak about not reducing the millage. It was, now that I know where the money is being redirected and we can do these things that we'd like to accomplish, I think that's a great thing. So I will agree that the 2%. Thank you, Bo. Thank you, Mayor.
I will also throw into the pot for the council to consider. We saved $100,000 off that master plan that's coming out of general fund. A mill is 81. If the council wants to save additional money, then I'll acquiesce with only a 1 mil reduction.
I was gonna say, compromise with Steve and compromise, I just told Bo that. I said, let's compromise with Steve and compromise with Harry and do a 1 mil And that 1 mil will almost pay for another position. So let's do it instead of 2 mils, 1 mil reduction. And that shoots more money like back into the
I just
budget.
want to show everybody how flexible I am.
Chief, you don't have to hire a half a policeman then. We could have a whole one for you.
No, 1.5.
All right, I agree. I think if
Meet in the middle.
1%, if 1% shows
Thanks, Harry.
fiscal
I was
responsibility.
going to suggest that. That's a good
All right, so
compromise.
Thank you, John.
Mike, can I ask you a question about the help of our DA fees that's coming in?
Not now.
No, we're.
I said not now.
Like, I mean, are we plucked or?
Yeah, so every time when we develop this budget, we make projections on building permit activity and voluntary development fees. And I can provide that. I've never provided that because it's a lot of projections, but Mr. Mearsman asked it. I do a report, well, every month based on the information we get from Miss Ashley based on my projections versus actual. And so as an example, I think we're 28% higher in revenue projection than even what my estimate was, which was extremely conservative.
That's why.
But to answer your question, Val, yes, we are,
Are we healthy?
we're very financially healthy with
in that area?
voluntary development fees. I think that I just saw the total amount is probably in the neighborhood of, I don't want to guess, maybe probably 25 or 26 million. Now that's all the categories. So that's, external roads, internal roads, police, fire, parks, schools, and I'm missing something. Library. So, and I can, if you're interested in that, we can provide that. Every month, we update these
No, I
these
just wanted
figures.
to know off the top of
Yes.
your head, how healthy is our?
Extreme. Well, we'll just say we're financially sustainable and robust. We'll put it that way.
Robust?
Yes.
Robust, I like that word, robust.
Yeah. Oh. All right, so just to summarize, what I hear is the direction of the council, that we will hold off on the bike and pedestrian master plan. We will take the 5 positions, which is the rec person, the accounting clerk, and 3 FD, and put that money, whatever it is, into the police department, and we will take a 1 mil reduction in taxes instead of 2. And the other thing we decided was to take the 8.58 COLA increase down to 5.5. Is anybody object to any of those things that we just discussed?
I'm not an objection. I would just like to see at least one new firefighter brought in, but it's council as majority rules.
Well, let me just say, because I know that we have the chief here, and I know there's probably firefighters watching on TV right now, and they're going to be disappointed. The reason I looked up the numbers from fiscal 17 and the amount of money that we put in, not because I object to that. I just want, Chief, make sure you men and you women understand. It's just, to me, with that huge increase in all the money we spent on new equipment, it's more a priority right now to have the money. It's the police department's turn. And we'll come back and we'll add it next year, but we just want to make sure that we adequately fund the police department. That's a priority. Not that your need is not legitimate. We're fine. I want you to make sure you understand that. We all believe that fire department is a legitimate public service, a public safety service, and that's why we've put all this money into it over the last 5, 6, 7 years, okay?
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
can I make just a suggestion? Another compromise?
Oh, no, how flexible is it? How many compromises?
We gave you.
Yeah, yeah,
Everybody pass your Reese's peanut
yeah.
butter cups to
Mayor,
your
have a
friends.
Snickers.
This is just a suggestion off the top of my head here. I don't have them often, so y'all need to listen. No. Since we cut the mill off, the one mill off, why can't we use that one mill to give the fire department one position? And that way we haven't changed all our other plans. The five spots or whatever still going to Sam. But that one mill that we cut off will pay for, more than pay for one fire department position.
So we go back to the 2 mil. Or I mean, we go back to 0.
No.
No? Oh, use the money from the mill.
From the one mill that we cut off,
And then get.
to use it for the fire department so they can get one position. Sam still gets his people. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. Except we cut that one mill off at the fire department because they haven't had anything. And I agree with Harry Hunter, all of us do. They've gotten a lot of money and stuff, but that way they're getting one position.
I agree.
It's just a compromise.
I agree.
Okay, so the fire department still gets, I'm taking it, man. I'll take the bribe. The police department still gets that 300 and whatever, that amount of money. The mill reduction, which is $162,000, gets reduced to 81, and that other $81,000 goes to fund a fire department. And that's, we didn't touch the 6 part-time paramedics for the ambulance.
That's right.
Okay. So I,
Good suggestion.
flexible today. Okay.
WD-40 helps.
After today, I'll be drinking that stuff. Okay, all right. So, all right, any other,
Thank you, Steve.
any other comments? Otherwise, you know, that's, and that's just my list. Please, anyone from council, if there's other concerns that you have, please, let's not leave here without making sure anything that you feel strong about is addressed.
One person, other person that we're going to hire for the fire department, will bring down
No.
overtime.
No. He said it wouldn't matter how many he hired.
Difficult decisions today. Nothing is easy. There's, I don't want to say winners and losers, but there's disappointment and there's gains. And it hasn't been easy decision for myself, and I'm sure for the rest of the council folks. This is just, it's a difficult time coming into a budget. We're growing a lot faster than I would have ever given. But I think the decisions we made here are fiscally sound today, and I'm glad that people on this council have that like and thought.
I still got one question.
I'm not compromising again.
No compromise. I just want some clarification. I guess we're gonna probably vote or whatever in a few minutes.
Well,
You need to see the numbers.
But still not, I just want Mike to look at me and tell me how this enterprise thing, I'm still not clear on how we will handle this, Mayor, when we vote on this budget. Are we gonna do, because John had said something about we might do a loan or whatever. What are we gonna do with this budget about enterprise as far as you're concerned, it's gonna make you happy and solve this?
So our proposal is probably going to come in June, John. We're proposing keep paying Enterprise until June 30th. That buys that down to what, 900,000, maybe a little bit lower.
Okay.
Then we're going to negotiate with them and still try to say we don't believe 900,000 is
Okay.
fair. We want to pay whatever that amount is.
Okay.
We're going to come back to the council then and say we want to do a loan, a 5-year bank loan, pay off whatever that amount is, and then at the end of that, and then we put that debt service payment as part of this 24 budget, which is already in there.
Right.
And then at the end, we'll have all those vehicles. So, whenever
That's what I wanted
we can
to hear.
dispose, that's our plan. And then we're going to come back with a proposal, talk about, right now we're doing vehicle repair and maintenance. We're doing that at Public Works. But if we propose to move to a much higher level of service where we're doing more vehicles instead of going to Butlers or you know, the Ford dealership or wherever, we're gonna come back and talk to the council. This is what it's gonna cost. This is what the resources we're gonna need to be able to make that transition versus just using the vendors that we use now.
And that's what I was referencing with Mr. Brown would
Yes,
be
sir.
doing that. That's good.
Yep, and Mr. Brown and Miss Jody had been to Bluffton, so they've talked to their, how they do business, and they do all their own facility or vehicle maintenance, so we're trying to get best practices. When we come back to you, we have a solid plan that, you know, that we're very comfortable and confident that we can execute it.
And we invite you to be very, very tough negotiators.
Yes,
with
please.
that.
Definitely, we
Absolutely.
will do that. Yes, sir.
Just for clarification, and then you have the debt service for that loan built into this budget,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And on a 5-year,
5 years, right, John? Yep.
okay, any idea what type of interest rate you'll be able to receive on that, John?
We're working with
EFM. Jeremy, I think it's around 4%, John, wasn't it?
yeah, it's gonna be in that 4 to 5% range.
Okay.
We're working with Webster Bank, who we have some other notes with.
Okay.
And we're trying to leverage the fact that we already have a relationship with them into a number of different products that we're looking to do next.
Okay, just keep us apprised on how this is working through. I do suspect that you'll have all the vehicles inspected and appraised before you start negotiating with Enterprise on this. But just keep us in the loop on where this is going.
Of course, any loan or anything has to come to y'all anyway.
Sure. Okay,
We
thank you.
certainly see it on both ends.
Rena, I have a question for you. Since Enterprise has not kept up their end of the bargain, could we go after them for breach of contract?
There's a difference between the legal breach and then the breach of what our expectation was.
Okay.
Just because they were just performing much slower than was
Okay.
expected. So, that's kind of where we are with that. I don't believe so. It was reasonable times, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a legal breach.
Okay.
But just because it's not a legal breach doesn't mean it's still not a contract that's not working for the city, because practically it sounds like it is just not working for them.
So can we use that as a negotiating point to negotiate
Yeah, I mean,
further
absolutely.
down?
Absolutely. I mean, the city manager said we're going to try to negotiate it down.
Okay.
But as far as taking a legal action against them, in my opinion, under that contract, I don't believe that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go a couple rounds.
Okay, so let's make it official and make sure that we're all on the same page. We already voted on the 5.5%. Let's deal with the other budget items. Taking off or delaying the master plan on the bike ped trails. Mayor Pro Tem White, are you in favor of holding off on that master plan?
Yes, I am.
Let's see, let's go back alphabetically. Mr. Carroll? Yes, sir. Mrs. Guzman?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Mearsman?
Yes.
Okay, so that $100,000 in the general fund is saved. Then, in personnel, we decided to do the following. First of all, we reducing from 2 mil reduction to 1 mil reduction. Mayor Pro Tem, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Mearsman?
Yes.
Mrs. Guzman?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Okay, so we're only going to take a 1 mil reduction this year. Then, in terms of the personnel changes that were requested, we are going to take the dollar amount of the rec person, the accounting clerk, and 3 firefighters. That money will all go to the police department. Yeah. Wait, let me finish. And then what we will do is add back a fire department personnel.
Listen, yeah.
So you're still going to take the money from the 5,
I got you.
give it to police,
Right.
but we're going to use the reduction of the mill to add back the fire
to
department,
fire. Oh, okay. Yep,
okay?
yep,
That's what we talked about.
yep.
So, Mayor Pro Tem,
I'm in favor.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mrs. Guzman,
Yes.
Mr. Mearsman. Okay, so that's, the straw polls have been drawn. You got it? Okay. that's the first.
I'm ready for Hispanics weekend. Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Council, I've exhausted my previous memos. Any other comments or questions or concerns about this budget?
I'd like to make just a comment, and that is, first of all, good discussion, a lot of give and take, and I think we came up with some good decisions. But I want to emphasize, we really appreciate the work of our our folks down at the rec thing, and also James for you and MIS. And it's important that although we're not giving all that was requested, we appreciate what you're doing, and we're taking care of a very critical issue around Exit 5 and some things that we need to do that restore and keep the character of our city. And we appreciate your understanding that this is a delay, and next year, let's remember this. And I just want to make that comment for folks that are working real hard, that we appreciate it and recognize it.
Yes, sir.
I would like to also reiterate what Bo's saying, so we'll be synergetic with each other. But I have been on the other end. I've been in the city manager's office begging for something and saying, you don't understand, I need so-and-so, and, no, you're not going to get it this year, whatever. So I know, and it was hard for me to make some of these decisions, probably harder than anybody up here, but I think we came up with a good compromise, and some of the departments that we, like I say, both said that we cut, that doesn't mean that we don't appreciate what they have done and the sacrifices, and I hope that they understand that, and next year we'll try to, just like we looked out for the PD this year, we can probably try to do something next year, but it's this year, we need to help the police department as much as we can.
Any other comments by council? Suggestions, concerns?
I actually have one question or concern, and this has nothing to do with the budget. Whatever banks that we have our monies, because we've seen a lot of banks folding up and going out of business for whatever reason. Are our money safe where they are?
Yeah, so most of our general banking done with South State Bank. But
Okay.
all of our investments are done generally with the state.
Mm-hmm.
The state has an investment pool that we invest all of our money in.
Okay, and don't have to worry about it
We don't have to worry
going
about
belly
that.
up. Okay, all right,
me.
thanks.
I'm extremely proud of Hardyville. I'm extremely proud of the staff, you all here and the rest of the staff within the city. We're all working towards a common goal. The council, staff, everybody is to provide a good, safe environment and watch our city grow the best that we possibly can. And I do feel it's so very important that we work towards that goal as a team. And we've shown that here today. Mike, are we still on tap then for a first vote on the 18th then of May?
No, that's what I was saying. So we're going to recalibrate the budget. So
Okay.
probably June 1st, because we got to get a public notice. There's so many days, notice for the public hearing. So we will not be able to make but we should be able to get council in the next week. Basically what you've voted on here today, or get direction today, recalibrate the document, get it out to June 1st, and then it'd be June 15th would be the
Okay,
2 readings.
that's what I was going to ask. Is the quickest that we can get this paperwork, the better
Yes, sir.
we can make the decision. But there again, I think we've worked hard today to get to where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, council, that pushback, we know Mrs. Guzman will not be here the 1st of June.
Yep.
And so it's important that June 1, the other 4 of us attend. And it's 3:00 because we'll be going to the Royal Live Oaks Academy commencement. You're all invited to attend. It's not mandatory, but you are invited if you'd like to attend the commencement services. And that, by the way, I don't know, maybe, John, you're the only one here. If you'll recall, I think it was 2016, I visited a 5th grade class who asked me for help with getting playground equipment. And they performed at Sun City, they raised money. That leader of that 5th grade class, Nathan, is graduating high school this year, and he was an impressive young man. So you are getting older. I'm not. Okay, one other piece of business for council. I will be sending you an email later tonight. Please look at it. There will be an executive session just among the 5 of us, and I want to nail down a date as soon as you. So please look at that, and I'll give you some dates, and we'll get that scheduled. At your request, we'll have that executive session. Okay? Thank you. Nobody else has anything else? Then let's have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.